target would have been Hirohito. In fact, Hitler would rather commit suicide by not only shooting himself, but biting into a potassium capsule at the same time, so that he would not be captured by the Soviet Red Army. So guerrilla war is tyrannicide, killing tyrants, temper tyrants.
Germicidal.
But it's not just a matter of killing. The objective is to reinstall a legitimate order. If the status quo ante was not legitimate anyway, then it would evolve into a revolution. Guerrilla war in service of a revolution. So these are the elements found both at the combat and not combat level. It is not opposition for opposition's sake, but it's based on principles. That's why not all armed men are real guerrillas. Some are highwaymen. They just took advantage of the situation to rape, pillage, and burn as well. So they were disciplined by the legitimate guerrillas. By direct action, of course, that would be the path of violence. Because guerrilla war, especially in the context of a global war, harsh words are not needed. In fact, it can be soft-spoken. But your language is the language of bullets and the language of knives or West Cuchillo. But you need a combination of both violent and civil disobedience. And we saw this in Europe, as my previous example would bear. So it is also at the same time a conscientious objection, but it is a consensus objection that leads to armed struggle. Because not all consensus objectors, like the movie with Andrew Garfield, that was a World War II movie, leads to transformation. So there's an element that, like I said, it's a political process. So hopefully the guerrillas are conscious that they have political objectives and that they want to transform the situation. So here we have 5 more additional illustrations of guerrilla war as the science of resistance. That injustices are existing and have been worsened. So if the Americans were imperialists, the Japanese were worse imperialists. Kaya egregious eh. It is blatantly harmful. And so you want to correct that. We just don't know if Mahatma Gandhi's ahimsa and satyagraha would have worked against the Nazis. So the second part, the opposition is not just yung bukso ng damdamin, because you will not be able to sustain rage unless it is channeled towards the existing order. Of course, number 3, because you're the weaker party to the contest, a lot of it will be clandestine. So you keep it light until it's time to go dark, and then you go very dark. That's why guerrillas can afford to play the guitar, sing songs, be happy until it's time to go into action. So it is hard on the psyche and emotion because you have to go from 0 to 60 in terms of violent action, from 0 to 60. And so this is not your garden variety politics of opposition. It's mentioned of parliamentary opposition or even extra parliamentary opposition or even parliament of the streets. It's extraordinary because you are, if at all, ballot defensive and bullet offensive. And you cannot do this via Zoom. It will be upfront and personal. Especially in our case. That remember our guerrillas only carried 5 bullets. And you don't want to waste your bullets. So the tendency is to kill the Japanese by slicing their throat or when they're asleep. So that's not a usual human response. So when we say kills, these are already existing organizations like fraternities, co-ops, neighborhood associations. Meaning to say, you already knew one another from your previous social engagements. And you can tell from your colleagues in the organization if they can be dependent on in a crisis or emergency. And a war is emergency of extreme measures. So you will have to, number 2, grapple with the question of good and evil. And since the average lifespan, in combat would be 30 minutes or even less. You have to make peace with your God. Why are you doing this? Without embarrassment, because precisely the struggle has already transited from peaceful to violent. And number 5, if your group is being targeted, either you hang together or you hang separately. So this is not the work of serial killers. This is not the work of individuals. And therefore, you must talk it out how much violence you are going to implement for every action, or even avoid violence altogether as a group, whether or not there is a chain of command, because it's guerrilla warfare. So ideally, there is a well-defined, concrete political community, the barangay, the tribe,
Kapitolyo ito, no? Kapitolyo ito.
civil liberties union, for example,
May mga
already knew each other,
kuwan.
or a political party.
Oo.
And this is an extension of your politics by other means. Why is it spontaneous? Because of victimization, your family is murdered when you are not there, and you see the opportunity to even the odds, but since you've already done it, it would be difficult for you to replicate it without joining a group that has discipline in the field. And so, like any war, guerrillas lead from the front, and so the leaders would be the first to be the casualties. And so the second and third in command should always be ready to take up the mantle. So the supreme test here is if you can sustain your efforts. So there are many guerrilla groups in the Philippines. Some of them, in fact, were absorbed by the bigger guerrilla groups like the Hunters or the Hooks or the military districts. Because the groups of only 15 young men all they will be able to do is meet each other and drink coffee.
Kanta-kanta.
And it would be just like what happened to the White Rose movement of Germany. They were college students. So since they were not armed, they were easily discovered by the janitor of their school, who was a Nazi member. The same university where Rizal studied, University of Heidelberg. So the White Rose movement was martyred earlier, and these are Germans. So it has to be sustainable. So that means you will have to have your safe space or hidden. And the moment you do that, you become vulnerable to positional warfare. From the enemy was artillery, warplanes, and warships. So the spontaneity alone will probably not affect the political situation. Even the Americans found that out when they ambushed Yamamoto. Because they thought that by air ambushing Yamamoto, they would substantially weaken the Japanese Navy. Aside from revenge for Pearl Harbor. Church ka na magtuloy. Okay. So it's very much all politics is local. So all combat is local. And you can only impact the politics if you join the larger group. So of course, our attitude is celebratory, but it is only a part of politics. By the way, these are Dutch guerrillas. October 1944. Urban partisans. So these are your conventional definitions of, it was the Spaniards who started it. So guerrilla is literally little war as opposed to the real war of guerra. Kaya dapat guerrillero eh. Kaya lang tayo ito, guerrilla tawag natin eh. So even the Americans faced our revolutionary guerrillas during the Philippine-American War. So the Americans were trying to create their own guerrilla fighters. Even MacArthur in his reminiscences claimed that he was the head of the guerrilla movement in the Philippines. But this is an artificial way of creating a guerrilla group. This was mentioned by Dr. a while ago. Oh, by the way, this is a novel. This happened in Leyte. This is the story of a Japanese soldier who ate human flesh. So he's a cannibal. And it happened here. That is also the Sutherland that was mentioned a while ago. Sutherland was a racist. Not so much of a help to us even before World War. So with friends like this, we need enemies. Unfortunately, they were the ones trying to orchestrate the war from Australia and Washington. So the rest of the panel will provide the narrative. But these are framework for looking at guerrilla war as part of, it's a science, it's a social science of resistance. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that was Professor Bernard and Karganilla.